All right. Okay, yeah, so I'm here today to talk about automatic updates. And my name is Ted Bowman. I am Ted Bowman on Drupal.org and Twitter. As part of my work with the Drupal Acceleration team, I've been working on this since I think last summer. I'm also the settings tray and layout builder code maintainers for core. So as part of the Acquia Drupal acceleration team, we work on a bunch of different things. The things that I've been working on is Drupal 9 preparation, when that was a thing, layout builder, occasionally security issues, and most recently, automatic updates. These are some other people that have been working on the team. We have other people from the Drupal acceleration team. We have people from Pantheon and people from the DA and also tag one. If you're interested, this is an initiative that has a lot of different parts inside of Drupal core and outside of Drupal core. So we have, non-PHP Drupal code, we have Python code, we have user experience stuff that we need help with, and we have a lot of need for composer expertise because these are going to be composer updates. So people who have experience either with composer plugin or really sort of hard composer problems we could use help with. So yeah, if you're interested, I'll give you information at the end of the session, but you can always contact me about it. So let's look at an example of why security updates, automatic updates would be a good thing to have in Drupal. On September 13th of last year, there were 3 security releases that were published for 3 different minor versions of Drupal. And they covered multiple security vulnerabilities. Most were moderately critical, but there was one critical update. So a month after the release, about 45% or 100,000 sites still had not been updated or potentially vulnerable. So this is a real world example to show like how, even with all the work we do to publicize updates and make sure people know when a security update is coming, that a lot of sites just, for whatever reason, staffing, time, they just are not able to update. There are some caveats to this situation. Not all of these sites might be vulnerable to the particular critical security update. It could be that some of the sites looked at it and said, we're not doing this particular configuration that the release says you have to do to be vulnerable. And it also only covers sites that have the update module installed, because that's the only way we have any particular usage about particular versions that people are running.
Ted,
Also, yeah,
your slides are like a little cut off on one side. I can't quite
okay,
see.
yeah,
Thanks.
is that better?
Yep.
All right, great. I forgot to say, stop me for questions along the way. I'll stop at the end, but if people have questions along the way, let me know. Right now, people just expect things to automatically update. For example, WordPress has had automatic updates for about half a decade. A lot of people use Drupal as a backend for decoupled sites, and we're competing in that space with services like Contentful or other software as a service, things where people, for their backend, for their decoupled backend, they don't really have to think about updates for that. So it makes it harder for Drupal to compete against that when you have to worry about updating Drupal itself. And things obviously like Squarespace, that's completely software as a service, that you don't have, there is no decoupled backend front end, and you don't really have to think about updates at all. So this initiative started a couple of years ago, and right now there's a contrib module that does provide updates for 7 and 8. But the big caveat there is it does not support composer-based installs. So this is, if you have a tarball site, which is getting less and less popular, obviously, it is a way to provide secure updates in that manner. And I think the EU or the European Commission sponsored this, so there are, I think, just maybe less than 1,000 sites using this currently. But one thing to note is the automatic update initiative won't be supporting Drupal 7 or 8, because by the time it will be done, we'll be pretty far into Drupal 9. It would be really complicated to have the same system also work for Drupal 7. So if you're going to stick with Drupal 7, or if you have to for a while, this is a way to get some automatic update functionality. So our current goals for Drupal core is to provide highly critical security advisories, security advisory notifications, and then composer-based updates. And we're going to write for the MVP, it's going to be limited to patch level updates, meaning you could update from like 9.4.1 to 9.4.2, but not from like 9.4.5 to 9.5.0. And that has a lot to do with when we get into minor updates instead of patch level updates, there's a lot more complications as far as database updates. So the MVP won't support that. And it's kind of hard to see how it would support that also because there's API changes between minor versions. We try to limit them, but they still happen sometimes. And the other thing we're going for is to have automatic update rollbacks. So the rollbacks will probably be limited. Obviously, you can't use your site for a week and then try to roll back because of the way Drupal updates configuration and content. But a limited, what they call like a smoke test to see like, does your site load, and then maybe roll it back. So how this would work, this would maybe allow sites to be automatically updated for, say, like a year. We have an example timeline here where for each minor release, there is 6 months of support and then 6 months of security support, meaning only security updates. So somebody could, say in the future, be on 9.4.0, and if they were willing to skip 9.5, meaning they want to go directly from 9.4 to 9.6, they would only need patch level updates until 9.6 comes out. So that would be a year total of just automatic updates. Probably in most sites, there'd be a lot of caveats for that. So the MVP also won't support contrib updates. So obviously you probably need to support contrib updates, but for core updates, it could get you a year potentially. The first thing we're working on in core is the security advisory notifications. So right now in core, the update module provides notifications for available updates and security updates. But a lot of people have the update module disabled. And also these updates don't link to any further information about why you should update. But every once in a while, every year or so, we have really, really highly critical updates. What the community has called something like Drupalgeddon, where we want all sites to update, or to be aware and to update as soon as they can. So the first thing we're working on this initiative is to have these notifications inside Drupal core that link out to Drupal.org for highly critical security advisories. So this would not be for every security update. This would cover contrib and core, and hopefully it will be ready in 9.2. It was RTBC, now it's pushed back. We're still working on it. So one of the things we're trying to figure out is whether this should be in the update module or the system module. And WebChick has just put something out on Twitter where she's trying to get some feedback on this. Originally it was in the update module, but we were worried with these highly critical security updates with all the sites that already have the update module disabled, that they would not go and enable the update module just to get these notifications. So we'd like to get into the system module, but right now the system module doesn't actually go out and ping Drupal.org for any reason. So if we did this, then out of the box, your site would ping back to Drupal.org to say, hey, are there any security advisory updates? And so if you're really privacy conscious, maybe you don't want that. We would have a way to turn that off, but we're trying to figure that out right now. The next thing we're working on in Drupal core right now is the update readiness checks. So basically, any update system, you're going to want to periodically check to say, okay, if an update came right now, would my site be ready to implement that update? So there are a number of things that might come into factor there. Like for composer sites, does your actual code base match what's in your composer.log file? Or have you, if you've updated a module, say by just dragging the folder in and not running composer update, then it would be really difficult to actually update that. Also file permissions. So a lot of hosting companies, they're not going to give you writable access to your production. So we won't be able to do automatic updates in that case. But there's a system we're adding to core, and this will be the first part of the automatic updates module that would check various things like that and give you a notification if you've fallen out of the state where you can be updated. And so this is really important because you don't want the automatic update system to be just sitting there, and then when you get a security update, it only notify you then to say, oh, sorry, I can't actually update this because something's wrong with your composer log file. So we're working on this now. There's a system, the readiness checkers is an API for, you can do hosting specific checks. So at Acquia, we're thinking about, the kind of checks that we would want that are particular to Acquia hosting. You may, if you host sites or any other hosting company, we'd be able to say, okay, we can write a readiness checker to notify our clients to say, hey, you're not going to be ready for this update for X, Y, or Z reason. They're going to be tagged services, and you're going to have warnings or errors, and basically an error would actually prevent you from updating. So it wouldn't even be attempted. A warning would be something that, we think could be a problem, but the update would be attempted anyways. So one of the things that we're relying on is the update framework. And this is something outside of Drupal. It's an existing project by the Cloud Native Computer Foundation. And this is basically a specification for how to make a secure updating system. And a lot of what it does is it sets up a number of principles for what an update system should be. And it says basically an update system should know about available updates in a timely manner. Any files downloaded should be the correct files, and the no harm can result from checking or downloading files. So these are just a couple of them. There's a whole bunch more. But basically, sets out these principles. And then one of the things that trust is another principle that it lays out, where trust should not be granted in an update system forever, or particular keys, and that trust should expire if it's not renewed. So if you're familiar in Drupal, we have roles, and this update system has a system of roles where different people could be assigned different keys. So you may be able to, add certain files, certain types of files, but not others to the update system. This is going to be important later because we're actually not just signing updates of Drupal core, but other things too that I'll explain. And it really goes, the update framework really works on mitigating key risk of the keys that are used to sign the different packages. And the idea is not that the keys won't ever be compromised, is that you always know that it's a possibility that your keys can be compromised, and how do you recover from that situation. And the other thing that the update framework does is it lays out, I think, a series of like 5 or 6 types of attacks that people might try to use on an update system. And then the specification details how the update framework, if correctly implemented, would protect you against the types of attacks. So one example is a rollback attack. And a rollback attack is basically where an attacker can somehow get between you and the update system and present you with older sites that older updates that you've already seen, basically try to convince you that these are the latest updates. So an example would be if there was a security update tomorrow for Drupal, and it's like 9.1.15, and it's a critical security update, but somehow an attacker can get between you and Drupal.org, and make it so that you can only see 9.1.14, and you think that's the latest update. You install that. If 9.1.15 is the security fix, it means that 9.1.14 has a security vulnerability. And so if a attacker can get you to think that's the latest update, it can get you to install software with a known vulnerability. So that's sort of the type of attack that it tries to guard against. So how this would work on Drupal.org is that Drupal.org would use a Python library, an existing Python library for the the update framework specification. And that's the server side specification. And then we're making a new client that's a PHP update framework client library that would basically call out to Drupal.org and what's called refresh the update framework database or repository. So we're able to use the Python one because obviously we don't need to ship the server part with Drupal, but we do need to ship the server library, the client library with Drupal. So we're rewriting that portion in PHP. So we've been working with the update framework specification, the people who wrote it, and they implemented the Python framework. Now there's different implementations in Go, and I forget which other languages, but the update framework has been used, I think, even like in car updates. So car operating systems use the update framework. So we're trying to use something that's a specification that a lot of people have already implemented. So we're not sort of making the update system totally on our own, at least the part where we're verifying the files that we download, which is sort of the most important thing. So another thing to think about when we're dealing with updates is you're almost never just updating Drupal core itself. A lot of security updates often have vendor packaged updates. So we can't really consider an update to your Drupal site secure unless all updated packages are secure. So the idea is that if we sign Drupal core's updates and we say, okay, we make a system where for sure you're getting a signed copy of Drupal.org that we know is the right package, and we're going to update your system. If we then also, Drupal core, maybe in its composer JSON in this update, has to bump, say, a Symfony version because there was a security problem in the Symfony package that Drupal core depends on. If we don't secure that package, then it's kind of like we might as well not have even secured the Drupal.org package, because if you can sort of compromise any of those packages, then you can run arbitrary code. So you want to secure all the packages. The other thing is that the way Composer works for any particular Drupal site, you may actually be updating any particular package. It's not as likely, but because of Composer constraints, maybe of a particular vendor package that you rely on that Drupal core doesn't rely on might get bumped in the process. So that is kind of like a really big problem that we're trying to figure out. And the current thinking is that we're going to implement a Drupal.org packages mirror. So the idea is that when Drupal wants to download vendor packages and Composer metadata from packages, it's going to call to Drupal.org to get signatures for those files, either before it downloads it, or it may download it through Drupal.org, or it may download it from packages and then ask Drupal.org for signatures. The problem with that is that with any particular Drupal site, it may have any particular Composer dependency being updated. Drupal.org obviously can't mirror everything right away. So it's going to do something called a lazy mirror. So basically, if you have some Symfony package, that needs to be updated, it's going to call out to Drupal.org and say, hey, do you have a signature for this package? And if Drupal has seen it before, it says, oh yeah, I've already signed this package. Here's the signature. Check to make sure this is the right file. If Drupal.org has never seen it before, maybe you have like XYZ package that nobody else is using besides you. If it's on packages, Drupal.org will say like, oh, I don't have that one right now, but I'm going to get it and I'm going to report back, really quick with the signature. So that basically it would mean that any package that you ask for from Packagist, Drupal.org would be able to get you a signature either right away or very, very quickly. So that does require a composer plugin that's sort of aware of that, the laziness of that it needs to wait on particular updates. So how that would basically work is most likely is because these are unintended updates, Drupal core may try to update to the next version, the next security fix, and then Drupal.org would say, hey, you have to wait a minute. I don't have all the signed packages yet. And then it maybe would check back shortly after and say, okay, and now I have everything, and your site would be able to update. This is honestly one of the more complex parts of the auto update system so far, and the thing where we're just figuring out how this might work. And the Drupal Association is sort of probably going to take on a lot of building this part. So how it might look is you have your Drupal site calling out to Drupal.org, and then Drupal.org is calling out to Packagist, and Packagist is keeping an update framework repository with all the file signatures for any package that any Drupal site might ask for. So this is sort of like a to be determined actually how it's going to work, but that's the current thinking. If anybody has better ideas, we'd be open to it. But
I have a question.
Yes.
So when you say signing, are you talking about like GPG signing of commits or like hashes?
No,
like you'd see
hashes of files.
Okay.
So yeah,
Packagist does that. So I feel like I'm missing something.
Packagist, yeah, it does that, but only, so there's a lot of other stuff about like availability and listings that Packagist doesn't do that's implemented in the update framework. So yeah, if it was just signatures, we could get it from Packagist, but the other parts of the securing the files from the update framework that Packagist doesn't do is kind of where we have to fill in the holes.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, the Drupal Association's been talking about Packagist, so talking to Packagist about this. So ultimately, the goal would be for Packagist to actually implement this, and that Drupal.org would not need to be the go-between. But the current thinking is that there may be a time period before Packagist implements this that we would still like auto updates to work. So we would provide this mirror, and then eventually the hope would be that the mirror would go away. So that obviously, like any site that wants secure, or any Drupal app, any PHP application that wants updates via Packagist would like this update framework to add this extra level of security. And especially because the update framework is being implemented by the Python community, by the Go community, and by other companies and other other computer programming language communities. So it is something that's getting a lot of adoption. So that is hopefully one of the reasons why Packagist would want to implement this, not just because Drupal wants this, but that's sort of to be determined. Yep. So we've started a server implementation that I think most of the work that's been done here is not dealt with the lazy mirror implementation where it's going out to Packagist. This is kind of like a newer idea. And Typo3 has also been interested in the server side of this. So basically it's when we're dealing with a Drupal ecosystem, you have the sort of complexity of the packages lazy mirror that I was talking about, but also all of contrib. We would eventually like to sign all of contrib. And it gets complicated because the contrib, you could have a contrib release at any point. So you could have a contrib release at the point that you're updating one of your dependencies that depends on one of those contrib projects. So sort of making sure that you're always in the most current state of signed, or not, targets in an update frame, in the update framework repository. So not just the signatures. Right, where we've made most progress is on the PHP Tough client. So this is something that we've had interest from Joomla and Typo3, and obviously the Drupal project. So this is a outside composer. This is just an implementation to basically call to an update framework server repository and say, hey, I've just downloaded this file. Get me all of the latest information, including the signature for this file, to make sure it's the right one. So for that to work with Drupal and to work with the way that our lazy mirror is going to work, we have a composer integration plugin that we're working on. So this would basically mean that it would check the signatures for composer metadata and the packages itself. So I think actually that may be one of the things, I forget, but I'm not sure if I had the question before about the signatures, is I don't think that Packagist actually provides the signatures for the metadata. I could be wrong, but we're also trying to make sure that we can verify the metadata. So the packages.json, I think, that comes with from Packagist and for each individual package, because potentially if you can compromise the metadata, then you can just confuse somebody into downloading an older version of a project and think it's the latest. So we're trying to make sure we can verify the metadata and the packages. So we're working on this composer plugin that would work with the PHP Tough library. So at the start of this initiative, we helped work on some Composer 2 improvements. So one of the things that we added or helped get added was a Composer download event. And so this is Composer 1 has a pre-download event where it tells you some information about the package, and the Composer plugin can run some code, but Composer 2 added a post-file download event. So basically, after a file is downloaded, you can verify it. Unfortunately, this was not added for metadata files, so we're sort of looking at ways that we can also verify the metadata files too. Right now, it's only for package downloads, not the actual Composer metadata. The other thing that some people from Drupal were a little bit involved with, but is a big improvement for Composer do, is the memory usage. So if you've used Composer 2, it's a lot faster and uses a lot less memory. And this basically will allow doing an update via a web request. Whereas with Composer 1, for a lot of sites, it would just be too memory intensive to actually do an update via Composer. So the current plan is we would have another Composer plugin that would do a staged update, which would mean that Composer, working with the update framework, would do a Composer update into a temp directory so that your Drupal site can still be accepting traffic. There'd be some sort of verification on the update, the Composer update into the temp directory. And then once everything is good, your site would be put into maintenance mode for a very short period of time, like a couple seconds, and then the update would be moved over into your Drupal site. And so this is, if we didn't do this and we just tried to update in place, then your site would probably be being hit, and also your site would be in an inconsistent state with some files being updated and some files not, which could really cause a lot of problems. So we're working on a Composer staged update plugin. So this was a solution to basically how do we get uninterrupted updates. And we had first looked at an AB bootloader, which would basically install into a B directory, and then Drupal's index.php after the update would switch to it. But our current idea is to do this Composer staged update, where we have a new Composer command that would kind of just wrap Composer update, and after the Composer update, it would copy it back from that temp directory. Yeah, so we're doing for the staged update. right now there's a lot of complications for trying to do a database update in this. And so that we're basically, the MVP probably will not do this because there's not a really good way to know if your site is going to need a database update until you actually have the code. There's nothing in our update system beforehand, before you actually bootstrap, that would tell you, oh, you have a composer, you have a database update that needs to happen. And a lot of this happens to do with just the way that our update system is one of the older parts of Drupal. It hasn't changed a lot in a long time. So so it could be that the MVP won't support database updates, but hopefully it will. The other thing is a big problem that we're looking at is patched sites, and should we support the Composer Patches plugin, which I think a lot of people use now. Because obviously if we don't support patched sites, if they're patched properly in Composer, then we're going to leave a lot of people out. So some people have asked when I've done this session before about Git implementations. So the auto updates is not going to know anything about Git. So it's up to individual people or developers to get to decide on their workflow about how it gets committed to Git ultimately. So I think I went all over these. So if you want to get involved in the presentation, in the initiative, we meet every 2 weeks, which I think next Tuesday is going to be one of our meetings in the auto updates channel of Slack. And we have core issues tagged with the automatic updates initiative. We have the PHP-Tough, which stands for the update framework, GitHub organization. And some of that probably is going to move under the Drupal.org namespace, but for right now, that's where it's at. Where we have the 3 main repositories, that is the client implementation, the Composer integration implementation, or plugin that integrates with the client implementation of Tough, and then the Composer staged update. And in the fall, we did a number of sort of 4-day virtual sprints. And we don't have any scheduled right now, but we'll have some. And also in Drupalcon North America, we're going to have sort of a day for automatic updates, where we're going to have another keynote, and we're going to have a sort of deep dive for like how you might get involved with the initiative, with the details of how a lot of this stuff is implemented, and we'll have sprints there. So, questions? Find my Slack.
There's one in the chat.
Okay. Not Slack's good. All right, sorry, trying to find Zoom.
Want me to just read it?
Yeah, sure.
Sean says, to expand on that Git managed point, a common setup is Circle CI or similar, building assets and deploying from there to the host. Seems like this would leave those out entirely.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, a lot of this is going to be sort of modular, so you could probably use parts of it, but not all of it. The main impetus of this work is the first sort of, I guess, sites that we're going after is the long tail of Drupal sites that do not have a sophisticated workflow. One reason is because if you have a sophisticated deployment workflow, then it's pretty hard to make an auto update system that is aware of people's varied workflow. The other one is that those sites are probably the sites that are more often not auto updating, and because an auto update system by its nature needs to be able to write, needs file write access to wherever it's currently being hosted. So even at Acquia, you don't have write access for security reasons in production. So we're looking at using this auto update system, but not probably using all of it. And one possible way to use that is to end your workflow. Basically, we will have the auto update system should be modular enough to where basically you can say, notify me of security updates. And if there is one, then it's probably up to the person who has the workflow to trigger something. But in that job, you'll be able to call like auto update security update or something like that. But basically it would mean like it would update your site to the latest security update of Drupal. And then also it would do a test of like, okay, did it, according to your settings of that you have inside Drupal, did it perform the update correctly? And so some of those settings could be like, I only want to support security updates. So for Drupal core. So then the system would be in charge of saying like, oh, well, this security update of Drupal core actually forced you to update a contrib module. And you said that you don't want to support updates to contrib modules. So sort of fail out with a notification that, again, you would be responsible for in the Drupal CI of reacting to. Though probably in Drupal core, we would have like email notification ability if an update was performed but didn't succeed. Does that make sense? Not sure who asked the question, if they had a follow-up or anything. I got thumbs up. Okay, cool. Anybody else? Questions? So there's a lot of what we're doing now is working with the update framework because it has, the update framework is kind of like sort of the trickiest part. And the update framework is basically it basically just produces a bunch of JSON files. So we have a root JSON file that has like the root keys, which can be updated. And then the root in update framework basically specifies like 4 different other roles. There's a timestamp role, a snapshot role, and then targets role, where targets is basically like this signing key can sign actual files that get added to the repository. And so depending on how Drupal.org implements this, they could have, the idea is you would always keep your root key, that is the basically the authority for all of the signing for all Drupal core and all the packages offline, and you only would need it updated in the rare case that somehow the root key got compromised, which hopefully, since it's offline, wouldn't happen. But I guess the whole point of the update framework is sort of making a specification where you assume it is a possibility that your root keys could get compromised. Any other questions? All right. Well, this I think right now the ability is probably like a year out at least for Drupal core. And a lot of that has to do with sort of the moving parts outside of Drupal core and Drupal.org having time to update the, it's not something we can add to Drupal core without Drupal.org actually being aware of it, or Drupal.org needs that package signing ability before the auto update and functionality in Drupal actually has any reason to be. So that's sort of also the reasons we need to delay, because there's sort of 3 moving parts: the outside libraries outside Drupal core, the Drupal core work, and then the Drupal.org lazy packages mirror information. All right, well, there's nothing else. I guess you'll get your 5 minutes back. Thanks everybody for coming.